And welcome to the Scoop. I'm Kaelen Jones. Alongside me, my man Myles Duve. Myles, how have you been, bro?
I've been doing well. I've been doing well. The weather out here is great right now. It's in the 70s, which I like, and that's pretty good for California weather. How about you, though?
I've been good, man. I can't agree more. Getting out of Phoenix, finally getting back home to California. SoCal. The weather's been great. You're definitely right about that. But speaking of weather, the Patriots, they're going to have to deal with weathering the storm throughout the first 4 games of the season. Tom Brady being suspended as a result of the punishment for the Deflategate. Myles, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, Patriots also lost a first-round pick, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think what many people are really thinking about, like, is the NFL suspension or penalties, are they right in this sense? And I honestly believe that they are. And I'm kind of flip-flopping because we sort of talked about this yesterday, and I said they're wrong. But the more I think about it, I think it was the right call to suspend Tom Brady 4 games, which likely will be appealed, potentially even appealed down to 0 games. But then as well as taking away the first-round pick and future fourth-round pick and fining them, I believe, $1 million. I think all that in itself is more beyond just disciplining the Patriots. Is just sending a message to the rest of the league and to the fan base that, hey, whether it's on or off the field, we are going to come down hard on you if you do anything to affect the integrity of the league and integrity of the sport. And they're doing so by, of course, penalizing the Patriots, who we know is sort of like the poster child of the league. And many people consider them that they can do no wrong in the eyes of the NFL. And nevertheless, especially with the relationship between owner Robert Kraft and Roger Goodell, nevertheless, they still came down as hard as anybody has received so far, and for a penalty like this that took place on the field. So, I think it's really the right call for the NFL. And down the line, I think that the NFL knows what they have to do, and they have to take these matters more seriously, probably more seriously than they should be, just because of things such as the Ray Rice scandal or even the Greg Hardy scandal, where they did have some mishaps, I guess, in the eyes of the public. So this is the right step in the right direction, I think.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with you on that. Mainly because, like you said, Miles, like you took the angle as far as the NFL getting it right. My thing was whether or not they followed the rule of the law, and we talked about that a little bit last night, like you said during the first run through this. Like what it says in the rule book, it says pursuant to the policy on integrity of the game and enforcement of competitive rules. The first footnote in the Ted Wells report reads, under the policy, the standard of proof required to find that a violation of competitive rules has occurred is preponderance of the evidence, meaning that as a whole, the facts sought to be proved is more probable than not. So I think that the punishment, granted the fact that, I mean, the evidence provided proved that it was more probable than not that Tom Brady and the Ball Boys cheated in this instance. And again, we talked about them being repeat offenders. I mean, you got Spygate a few years ago. Now you got this. And like you touched on earlier, the Ray Rice incident, that's what it's going to be compared to. So I think the NFL really had to, take that step and really justify what the losses that they already have in place, because the rulings before have been questionable. At this point, at least you can. To me, I'd rather overrule and then bump down than underrule and then be under scrutiny for not ruling correctly. You can adjust this at least in this sense.
Yeah.
But, I mean, personally, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the key to me, is what you said about the whole bylaws, and that going overboard and having the ability to, I guess, retract from that is more efficient than, doing an underwhelming penalty and then having to compensate for that once the public comes out and, I guess, attacks the NFL for their discipline. So that is a proper way to go about it, is to overcompensate at first. Nobody really took the time to look at the bylaws in comparison to what the actual Ted Wells report said. And the more you say it, the more it is pretty spot on in terms of, this is the criteria that we are going by. It's not simply, oh, we just want to fine him or penalize him because just because it's Tom Brady and the Patriots. It's a criteria that the NFL has laid down in their bylaws, and it's strictly explicitly stated in the Ted Wells report that it was more probable than not, and that's the exact terminology that is used. So I think that justifies it even more, in my mind, at least. If anyone actually took the time to read that, I think they would be a lot more careful about questioning these decisions.
Exactly, and I 100% agree with you. I feel like people are just going by looking at the punishment in comparison to what the NFL already has in place because they have a rule book in place for this. I mean, they
Right.
didn't handle the Ray Rice situation according, but they did a great job, at least in my opinion, in this. And even the Greg Hardy incident. I mean, even though you and I kind of feel like it was an underwhelming punishment, they went by the rule of what they had in place, so you can't argue against that. So, as far as that's concerned, I don't have any issue with it at all.
Yeah, and now we're going to look at the NBA and the Patriots. We know they're a team that is consistently at the top of their so-called sport, but the Clippers, we're not used to what they're doing right now. So, what are your thoughts so far? The Los Angeles Clippers on the road potentially to the Western Conference Finals.
You know, it's interesting because, earlier in the season, especially at the beginning of the year, I thought this was going to be the same old Clipper team. I told you last show, I mean, I was clamoring for Vinny to come back. Might as well, because I didn't think they were going to be able to get out the first round, but they squeaked it out.
Yeah.
Like you said, Miles, I don't mean to steal your point, but you said they're an emotional driven team. And, when they ride that emotion, they tend to ride it to the furthest extent. And, they're an anomaly. I think Paulo Torres said that earlier today on Around the Horn, but they definitely are because they blow out Houston by 20 back-to-back games, and they get blown out by 20 when they go back to Houston. But I feel like that just speaks more to, again, the depth of the team. I feel like Houston's a much more talented team. That's still my opinion on it. But I feel like, again, when you got a veteran head coach, the only coach I think left that's been to the NBA Finals before, and Doc Rivers in the playoffs, and you combine that with, an extremely hungry CP3 and improving, at least getting more aggressive Blake Griffin. You're coupling that again with some of the production you're getting out of surprise production from Austin Rivers, JJ Redick in spots, Jamal Crawford. He had been playing well up until last night. So I think the Clippers, like you said, they really have a legitimate shot to be in the NBA Finals. I won't give them that just yet, but I think they're definitely headed to the Western Conference Final. I think last night was just a little hiccup. They've got a chance to really seal it off tonight when they play Houston at home. And I think even if it goes to Game 7, I think they're battle tested after defeating the defending NBA champion. I see the Clippers coming out of the Western, at least advancing to the Western Conference Finals. I don't know about advancing to the finals just yet, but I feel like they're battle testing. They're riding an emotional high, like you said. So I'm taking the Clippers tonight.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I'm taking the Clippers tonight. Really, that I think that loss in itself was an anomaly for the playoffs, and because Houston just not a team. They've shown so far they're not a team that's built for the postseason. James Harden has a long way to go in terms of being that team leader, but that's a whole nother conversation. I just don't think he's on that superstar level just yet. But looking at the Clippers, they look good. I have to say it. I hate to say it, but they look really, really good. And despite losing the other night, the team's consistently found a way to win, pull out a series or pull out a win. No matter how tough it is, they've consistently gotten production from, like you said, guys like Austin Rivers, JJ Redick, Jamal Crawford. These guys who are outside of their big three, they've gotten consistent production from at least one of those guys, and that's always been a necessity for them, but it's something they've consistently lacked up until this point. So if they can keep this trend up of getting production from their role-playing guys, then honestly, I don't think there's any team that's going to play better than the Clippers in the playoffs. I mean, right now, is there any team playing better than the Clippers on a consistent basis playing better than the Clippers in the playoffs? Like, I mean, I don't think Cleveland is necessarily on that level in terms of their consistency. I don't think Golden State is on that level either. They're probably the closest, but the Clippers have night in and night out put out a consistent effort out there and found ways to win games. So I feel like, as much as I hate to say it, not only will they be Western Conference champions, but they could and probably will be NBA champions at this point, because I think the momentum can carry them just that far. Coming off of a win against the Spurs in a 7-game series, they have that momentum coming into Houston where they blew them out 2 games in a row, suffered a blowout, but I think they're able to come back from that. And even coming back from that blowout is a little bit more stroke to their ego in a sense. So if they're able to do that, I think they have a lot of momentum to carry themselves to Western Conference Finals, past Western Conference Finals, to the NBA Finals, and end up beating whatever team comes out of the East. I would truly believe it. And it pains me to say that. It pains. But
yeah, it's music to my ears, man. It's music to my ears. If you're a Laker fan, have to admit that the Clippers are a great team. It sounds great. But you touched on it real quick. Like you touched on the inconsistency of the other teams in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I term that as like you said, the Clippers are a more consistent team. That hit up the other night, that's just a bump in the road. But you're looking at, to me personally, a team. I know that we want to say that Golden State is definitely a consistent team, but I term it as being streaky. When you ride this high and you can just drop so low. I feel like the Clippers' potential at least matches or at least can surpass what the Golden State Warriors can do. And then even on a bad night, what can happen to the Warriors in comparison to the Clippers? Because again, we talked about it before, the Warriors rely so much on 3-point shooting. When they don't shoot well from 3-point land, their floor is so much. It's such a gap between their floor and their ceiling.
I have to disagree with that because
you think so?
Yeah, because the Warriors, it's just a stigma I think they have. They're a great 3-point shooting team, but they don't rely on it. But there's games and moments where they tend to rely on their 3-point shooting, but when they do that, that's really out of their character. What makes them so great as a team and offensively is that not only are they phenomenal 3-point shooters, but they have the ability to penetrate and drive to the basket, and that's usually how they pick their spots in the sense. That's usually how Steph Curry starts the game off. I mean, if you notice, I believe it was game 5. Yeah, it was game 5 when Steve Kerr made the adjustment with Andrew Bogut. You could tell that Stephen Curry wanted to start off the game by penetrating to the basket and kind of creating the feeling that he's not really going to settle for the 3-point jumper. And then more and more from the third and fourth quarter, he started to shoot from outside and pull up and look more like himself. And what that did was create a lot of space on offense because the defense was sort of guessing in terms of, is he going to drive? Is he going to the basket? And both he and Klay Thompson are able to do that and keep the defense on their heels. So, I mean, I have to disagree that they're a 3-point shooting team that relies on their 3-pointers. But yeah, they are definitely a team that loves to shoot the 3 and can do it, but they're able to balance that with a strong ability to penetrate as well. And so I feel like that can carry them over the top against any team in the league. But like I said, I think the Clippers are going to beat them if they do meet in the Western Conference Finals.
Right. No. And I totally agree with you. Okay. I agree with you on that because I'm backtracking now. I'm kind of contradicting myself.
No problem.
So they're inside out team. I'll say that. Like you said, they set up 3-point by their penetration, which leads to the phenomenal ball movement. Because that's the Warriors basketball. Like they're the most fun team to watch in the league. But in the 2 games that they lost, they both shot 23% from the 3-point stripe in both games that they lost. Shot over 40% in both games that they won. So I mean, I don't want to say that they're relying upon it, but when they don't shoot well from the 3-point line, they're not playing well. And that's just a fact.
Well, that's exactly what happened in those 2 games against the Grizzlies, right? Those were against the Grizzlies.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's what happened. It was 2 games in a row they lost because they were relying too much on the jumper, and then they came back in game 5 and started to play like their old selves. So, yeah, I guess you're right when they don't hit threes and they lose. But, again, that's with a lot of teams. If you're going to take a lot of threes and you miss them, then you're going to most likely lose the game. But with them, it's a matter of keeping that balance between penetration, ball movement, and shooting the ball. And I think that they lost track of that in the first 2 games, but they caught on to it game 5, and clearly they blew Memphis out. So I honestly expect this more of the same for the next game. I think game 6 they can blow them out again, especially if Tony Allen is out.
And so, question: so if the Warriors face the Clippers, what are your expectations for that series? I mean, we're jumping a little bit in advance, but tell me how would the matchup work out in your opinion?
Yeah.
Team with the best record in the NBA back at
it. No problem. It's a tough matchup for me to pick. I pick the Clippers right now, but I've consistently flip-flopped on my picks. I'm not the best predictor in terms of NBA playoff series, but strictly looking at that matchup, I think it's going to be interesting because, like you said, Blake Griffin is really coming to his own in this playoff series. But who's been the guy on the Warriors who has been able to consistently stop the best inside presence on every team they face? Draymond Green. And I think put Draymond Green against Blake Griffin, that creates a whole host of problems for them because Blake Griffin really thrives upon exploiting defensive weaknesses of other big men who can't really step outside and guard him because he can handle the ball and he can drive to the basket and he's not strictly just a post player. But on the other hand, you have Draymond Green, who can easily guard players like that because he is a three-point shooter himself. He's more so a three-point shooter, I think, than he is an actual post player. So he can easily step out and defend Blake on the outside. So that's going to be a tough part for me. So where you're going to have the real matchup issues on the Warriors side is going to be at center. I think DeAndre Jordan can kind of dominate Andrew Bogut on the boards just because of his athleticism, and then as well as a point guard position. Because Steph Curry, I know he's as great as he is offensively. I think defensively he could struggle against Chris Paul, and we'll see what Steve Kerr does because he is pretty good at adjustments. But one thing I think he could do is put Klay Thompson on Chris Paul. Then again, though, I still think Chris Paul is able to exploit that matchup because he is, I think, in my opinion, probably the best point guard in the league still to this point. So that's going to be the interesting thing. I think the guard matchups is really what's key. And if I'm Steve Kerr, I'm going in there and I'm saying instantly, I'm Klay Thompson on Chris Paul. He has the best match. He has the length, he has the size, and he has the defensive ability to guard Chris Paul. And then you can put Steph Curry on a guy like JJ Redick, who's not much of an offensive creator himself. So that's what I would do. But I still think that the Clippers have the momentum to carry it out. But I would not be surprised whatsoever if I'm wrong. And the Warriors have consistently proven me wrong because I thought they would lose to the Memphis Grizzlies, and right now I just feel like they have the momentum to carry them over that series too. So I would not be surprised if the Warriors ended up being in the NBA Finals because I've been picking against them all year, and they've been proving me wrong since.
Yeah, no, I understand that because maybe not picking against them, but I've always been in doubt of them just because of their style.
Yeah.
No, and I totally understand that. But I mean, jumping over to Eastern Conference, you got Chicago taking on Cleveland. You saw the Dellavedova kick last night. I don't know if you saw that, resulting in Taj Gibson getting kicked out. Cleveland able to hang out, hold on to the win in the final seconds right after. Or that's back-to-back close wins after winning the game before, where LeBron hit the step back on the baseline to win the game right after them losing to Derrick Rose, where he banked in the long three-pointer. So what's been your opinion of that series so far?
Well, it's an interesting series to me. I think that the Bulls got a huge break the Cavaliers got a huge break with Pau Gasol being out for the last two games because what the Bulls were able to do with Pau Gasol against the Cavaliers specifically is that they were able to throw it into a big guy in the post, and whether the shot clock is running down or the play is breaking down, they're able to throw it to him, and he's able to make plays, whether it's a pass out of the pinch post or it's a pass out of the deep post, or he's able to just go up and score the ball. He has that offensive versatility to do that, and I think you take him out of that, then the Cavs can easily exploit their weaknesses on the inside because outside of Pau Gasol, there is really no other talented scorer other than Derrick Rose on that Chicago Bulls team. I mean, Jimmy Butler, yeah, he's coming into his own, but he's still not an offensive scoring threat that you would expect him to be at this point. And Nikola Mirotic, as good as he has been during his rookie season, he is still a rookie, and he's yet to find his shot during the series. And Joakim Noah has really fallen off the cliff in terms of his offensive ability. So they really needed Pat, especially against the Cavaliers, who, without Kevin Love and with the struggling Timofey Mozgov, they don't have that inside presence. It would be so easy to exploit that. Nevertheless, we've seen them struggle without him, and I know he's coming back for Game 6, but I think it's a little too late at this point because they're already down, 3-2?
Yeah.
And I think the Cavaliers will be able, if it goes Game 7, I think the Cavaliers will be able to carry out a Game 7 win at home. All in all, though, I would not be surprised if Chicago could win it because they've been able to stay close in these games regardless of, Pau being out. It's just when you have the best player on the court night in and night out, and that's what the Cavaliers do, they're always probably the favorite to win those games. And when you have a hobble Chicago Bulls squad, I think they're going to pull it out either 6 or 7.
No, dude, and I'm echoing your points. I mean, I pretty much agree with you on everything. I feel like Chicago's offensive efficiency has been what's been the reason why they've been struggling up to this point. Because, like you said, I mean, you pointed out how Mirotic still a rookie. He's been struggling during the series. Noah hasn't really been that efficient on the offensive end. Butler's still coming in himself. I mean, even D Rose, he struggled the other night where he shot 7-24 from the field, and you can't have that happen. And, Tibbs' team has always had problems with turning the ball over, anyways. And they really struggled the other night. I think Dunleavy's been the only consistent offensive weapon to this point throughout the series for
That's a shock.
Chicago. But I mean, like you said, man, when you have the best player on the court night in, night out, in LeBron James, he's essentially been carrying them, at least in my opinion, even last night, arguably having the best player of his career. So I just feel like Cleveland, I don't think that they're going to lose the series. I just feel like they're too talented of a team. You've got guys contributing, and again, Shumpert, J.R. Smith had an extremely good game last night. Kyrie Irving, who's been playing through injury, he's looked extremely well. So I just feel like Cleveland's just too talented at this point for Chicago. I mean, they're going to give them a fight. I feel like they're going to push it to 7, but I don't see Cleveland, again, like you said, losing at home in Game 7.
Yeah, and the Cavs are very similar to what I said about the Clippers in terms of they have guys step up on a night-by-night basis to win games for them, whether that is J.R. Smith or that's a Timofey Mozgov or that's the Iman Shumpert or even a James Jones who comes in with some crucial threes in late-game situations. They've had guys step up, role players outside of their big two, and it's really helped them throughout this series. And I think that's something that the Chicago Bulls lack. They rely heavily on Derrick Rose, and when he's off, as you said, he was terribly off at turning the ball over very inefficiently. When he's off, then that whole team is sort of discombobulated out on the floor, and you can just tell. So, yeah, I have to give it to the Cavaliers just because they have that ability to win games. And as we both agree, best player on the court every night, you can't go wrong. And Kyrie, we haven't even mentioned him. He's really stepped up after the hamstring injury.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
Did you see the graphic last night where they have like all of his little injuries? He's been hurt every single.
Yeah, the guy.
Crazy.
Yeah, and he struggled with injuries throughout his career, right? So, it's good to see that he's able to fight through this in his first playoff series. He has a really veteran's mentality in terms of he does not want to sit regardless of what the injury is. And he stepped up big with 3 3-pointers last night, I believe. He had around 20-something points. And it was a very efficient 27 points. So, yeah, if he can keep that up, then I think the Cavaliers have a good shot to beat the Bulls and eventually advance to the NBA Finals.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. But then looking at the other Eastern Conference matchup, we got Washington taking on Atlanta. You know, Atlanta struggled at least at this point.
Right.
Able to recover. You know, Paul Pierce wasn't able to hit another game-winning shot to take the 3-1 lead. But they've been, at least Washington, they've been without John Wall at this point. So what's been your opinion of that series at this point, Myles?
Yeah, the John Wall injury is crucial. It's crucial. I think that the Hawks caught a huge break with that, similar to how the Cavs did with Pau Gasol, because I think John Wall really exploits what the Hawks lack, and that's a matter of star power. The Hawks do not have any star power. As good as they are moving the ball, as great as their coach is, and Mike Budenholzer, they don't have a star that can come in every single night and be your go-to guy, and that's necessary in the playoffs. But now with John Wall out, the Hawks are able to play their own brand of basketball and not really worry about an offensive scoring threat outside of, I guess, Bradley Beal and maybe Paul Pierce. But there's no penetrators on that team. I mean, Ramon Sessions he's not on Wall's level. We know that. He's certainly not on Jeff Teague's level. And I don't even think he's on Dennis Schroeder's level in terms of a point guard. So it makes it really hard for the Washington Wizards. It really neutralizes their offense. And I think that the Hawks caught a big break because I expected them to lose this series with John Wall in there. And John Wall being out, they're going to advance most likely if he stays out. And lucky them, I suppose. They just do not look like a number 1 seed. That's for sure. They do not.
Yeah, you know, I totally agree with you. They look shaky to this point. And you touched on it, Myles. Like, Atlanta lacks the star power, but for what Atlanta lacks in star power, they make up for in efficiency. I think that's been the trademark of their game all season long. But then for Washington, when, again, we talk about how they have the star power, your number 1 star in John Wall is out. Bradley Beal's still coming into his own. Paul Pierce, I mean, he's really that veteran presence that they kind of rely upon. I mean, you got Nene and Marcin Gortat, who, I mean, they're great players, but again, they're not playoff studs
Right.
at this point. So I feel like their reliance upon that star power is kind of biting them in the butt per se, at least to this point, because when you're still a young team even with John Wall in the line, you're still a young team that's still kind of growing into its own. They don't really have that playoff experience, and I know Atlanta necessarily doesn't either. But again, they have a great chemistry as a team, as a unit. When you're watching Washington, you can tell something's missing when John Wall isn't on the court, like you said. I mean, you got Ramon Sessions, you got other guys trying to fill that void. But again, until they get John Wall back, I don't know if Washington's going to be able to hang on. I just don't think they're efficient enough of a team to out efficient a team like Atlanta, who, again, they've been playing this style of ball throughout the season.
Yeah, I like that word out efficient, by the way. But
I couldn't think of a word.
no, we're just adding to Webster's here. But yeah, like that brings up an interesting dynamic with me regarding the Hawks, and I'm gonna pose this question to you: Do you Atlanta, as currently constructed, let's say they're constructed like this for the next 2 or 3 years, do they have the solid team foundation to win a championship, or do you think that they need to make a trade or sign a big free agent to really carry them over the top?
I don't know. It's interesting because I like Al Horford. I like Kyle Korver, but Korver's getting older. He's actually in his 30s, and people don't really realize that because he's starting to peak late in his career. But then you got Jeff Teague, you got Dennis Schroeder, who's, I mean, those are your young guys. That's kind of the core. Damari Carroll, he's a solid player as well. So I don't know if Atlanta's going to be able to hang on and essentially be an elite team unless you see maybe some more growth in Carroll. We saw that this season, so who knows? Maybe Jeff Teague takes the next step. I don't necessarily know, but I feel like, again, you talked about how they might need a trade. I don't know if they need to go out and make a trade per se, but they do need to add another, above average piece, at least to their starting lineup, or even coming off the bench to really, fortify them as being a legitimate contender for years down the road. Because they have a talented unit right now, but again, this is the Eastern Conference where you got a lot of younger teams. I feel like within the next year or maybe even 2 years, this conference is going to be at least more competitive than what it looked like this season and even last year.
I agree, because I think a team like Milwaukee is going to step up, and I think Orlando eventually will step up if they make a big coaching change. Looking at the Hawks, though, I think that honestly they have a team perfectly constructed of role players that is just, to me, begging for a star player to come in and be their go-to guy. And I would honestly not be opposed to trading one or two of those guys for a big role player or a big star player, because sometimes too much of a good thing is just simply too much. They have too many role players. Not one of those guys who's going to step in and say, "This is my game." Not one of those guys is going to do that. And going into this offseason, whenever that may start for them, Damari Carroll and Paul Millsap, those are two of their free agents.
Right.
And it's going to be interesting. I honestly feel like Damari Carroll is going to be gone, because I think some team is willing to and going to overpay for him, especially after his performance in the playoffs and with the cap raise coming in 2017.
Right.
Anything going to be willing to overpay now for a contract that will look like nothing in the coming years. So Damari Carroll's probably out of there. I think they're likely to retain Paul Millsap. This is just my prediction here. But yeah, if I'm the Atlanta Hawks and I'm going to propose this to you, what do you think of potentially, let's say, taking Jeff Teague, right? Mm-hmm. And I think they have a draft pick this year that is from the Brooklyn Nets, and whatever other minor pieces you can put together, taking those two pieces, and maybe even you can sign and trade DeMar Carroll. So I'm just putting a trade together here. You take all those pieces sitting around Jeff Teague and DeMar Carroll in the draft pick, and you trade it to the Sacramento Kings for none other than DeMarcus Cousins. Now, well, the reason I say this is because Jeff Teague, I think, in my opinion, is expendable for the Atlanta Hawks. They have a guy in Dennis Schroeder who I think can start going into year 3 next year, I believe. Right. Next year, I think he'll be a comparable starter, especially if they got a star player in there like DeMarcus. DeMar Carroll, he's likely to be overpaid and leave anyways, so I think they wouldn't mind trading him away. And then that draft pick, as valuable as it may be, if they're a team that's trying to win now, it really is not that valuable, because they have these bench players like John Jenkins, Mike Scott, Peril Antic. Yeah. All these guys I think are very talented bench players for a contending team. And if you bring a player like DeMarcus Cousins in there, that changes the whole dynamic. I think you can play easily along Al Horford, because Horford can step out, and I think Millsap is able to slash. Just to me, I think that's the ideal trade. I guess I'm playing fantasy GM here, but I really like that fit with DeMarcus Cousins and the Atlanta Hawks. And I bring that up because he is on the hypothetical trade block, they say.
Right, that's what I was going to ask you, whether or not George Karl is willing to give up that piece when he just comes into Sacramento, and you got a younger team there. where he's really the centerfold of that team. But it's interesting. I was thinking about it, but I'd package Ontic into that deal. I'd ship, like you said, Teague, round 1 pick, maybe try to sign and trade DeMar Carroll, and yeah, I mean, it's a good return to me. It's a pretty good return, especially like you said, because Schroeder's growing into himself, entering his 3rd year. He's kind of proven that he could be a starter at this point. I think that he'd be able to handle the load. So if you're Atlanta, this is your star player. Like you said, they really need that go-to player. And I didn't really think about that. They don't really have a number 1 go-to guy in clutch situations. I mean, DeMarcus Cousins proved throughout the year that he's that guy. He, at least for the Kings at this point, he's a pretty good player. He's arguably the best center in the league. So I definitely like this move. I think it makes sense if Atlanta was willing to do that. They go out and get him. I mean, why not?
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with hypotheticals here, but I think that would be great, a win-win for both teams, honestly. And going back to your question about DeMarcus Cousins and George Karl, there's a bit of questions on whether they will fit. Cousins was not a huge fan of the firing of Mike Malone, and not really a huge fan of the hire of George Karl. He was not consulted on any of that from management, and I don't think that him and Karl are necessarily meshing as well as you would like them to. So he's certainly tradable. George Karl came out the other week or so and said, I've never said a player is untradeable. And that's a good strategy you have, but it means that DeMarcus Cousins is certainly tradable for the right return. I think that is a solid return. And it also works out well for the Kings because they're picking right now until the NBA draft lottery. They're going to be picking at 7th overall. So landing there, I think they can nab a guy like Willie Cauley-Stein from Kentucky. And that's your new centerpiece.
Wow.
It just, in a hypothetical situation, I mean, I'm not trying to take his job here, but I could potentially be Kings GM for the season if they want me to. But Willie Cauley-Stein there could step in right away with those pieces of Jeff Teague, DeMar Carroll, and whoever you draft with the Hawks pick. To me, that's a really solid return. And honestly, I think the team could be better than they were last year, certainly.
No, man, this is reminiscent. You and Kevin Avery need to start talking more on this show, man. I swear. That's Kevin's specialty, is all the trade deadline stuff and everything else. But, hey, I like it. Like you said, you get Will Trill, and you add him to Jeff Teague, pair him up with DeMar Carroll potentially, and Perry Ontic, another first-round pick. So, hey, Myles Duve for Sacramento Kings GM. Or can't name that.
No, I do not. I do not want to deal with that. But let's jump into – we talked a bit about coaching. We talked about George Karl, Mike Malone being fired. Now let's look at is it the New Orleans Hornets now? Or no, New Orleans Pelicans, I'm sorry. They fired Coach Monty Williams. They fired Coach Monty Williams after a playoff berth and I believe a 42-43 win season. First of all, what are your takeaways on that? And secondly, who would you like to see as a fit there in New Orleans?
And now, we talked about it before the show, Miles, whether or not who we'd like to see there. Actually, let me jump to your point. What are your thoughts on the firing? But I didn't. It came a little bit of a surprise. I'm sorry. It came a little bit as a surprise to me, only because I saw this team maybe not necessarily grow, but they broke into the playoffs for the first time. I thought next year they'd sort of take that next step. But as far as replacing him, I mean, we talked about before the show, Tom Thibodeau's name's been thrown around. I don't really know who else could really fit that role, but I don't feel like Thibs could be a good replacement, only because they talked about earlier today on Around the Horn, or I think Howie put one of the two. We talked about on ESPN earlier today. He drives his players into the ground, like Jimmy Butler's minutes. He averaged the most minutes in the league, I think, this year. You got Derrick Rose, who averaged a ton of minutes, and even before his injuries started logging up. And now we're starting to see it in the playoffs with Pau Gasol sitting out and everything else. So I don't know if that's the best fit for Anthony Davis per se. I feel like, at least for me personally, I feel like New Orleans should be an offensive-oriented team before being a defensive-oriented team, just because of the way that they're structured. I mean, you got two big guys in the paint, and Omar Asik and Anthony Davis, who are, I think they led the league in blocks. Maybe you could get more aggressive and bring him on as a defensive assistant, but I don't feel like that's a good fit. As far as anyone else in the league, personally, I don't know. I mean,
I'm gonna throw out some names to you. You can let me know what you think. They have Mike D'Antoni, maybe, Mike Woodson, former coach of the Knicks and the Atlanta Hawks, and one more name I'm drawing a blank on, but in terms of NBA ranks, that's I think the two names I've heard coming out of the league is Mike D'Antoni and maybe Mike Woodson, and Mark Jackson as well, maybe. So what do you think of those guys?
Out of those three, I'd probably take Woodson only because I want the consistency and just the way that I saw, Josh Smith and Al Horford operate the first couple of years that he was, or while during his tenure there, and even Joe Johnson, like the way that they utilize, I feel like that's maybe the most similar composition of the team. I mean, Mark Jackson during his time, I don't know how he'd operate coaching a team like New Orleans who doesn't have necessarily like the same 3-point shooters, like the snipers that Golden State had, but or even the point guard play. So I think it depends. I think Woodson out of those three is the best fit because I don't think New Orleans is going to be an up-tempo team. But I think Woodson, he's the most balanced of the three coaches. I feel New Orleans is a more balanced team.
Yeah, it's interesting. To me, it comes down between Mike D'Antoni and Mike Woodson. Between those guys, I think I have to agree with you with the Woodson, choosing Woodson because, like you said, in Atlanta, he did have success with guys in Josh Smith and Joe Johnson. And it is a similar structure because I guess your Joe Johnson on the Pelicans would be a Tyreek Evans or Eric Gordon, probably more likely. And your Josh Smith, I guess, in a sense, would be Anthony Davis, just Josh Smith times 10 probably, but that's your Anthony Davis. And honestly, I think Woodson can find success with this team because he's never had a player of that caliber, of Anthony Davis's caliber. And as bad as the Atlanta Hawks were to watch, at least to me, they're pretty a boring team to watch when they were in that Mike Woodson era, but they were consistently in the playoffs. And I think that Anthony Davis can be a player for Mike Woodson to really carry them over the top. And then if Drew Holiday can stay healthy, that's also the key to me. He struggled with the leg injury, I think, over the past 2 years. And if he's able to stay healthy, then that's also a key. But Mike D'Antoni would be a solid fit, I suppose. Like you said, they're not necessarily going to be up tempo. It's not their style of play, but you saw what he did with Amari Stoudemire and Steve Nash. I think Davis kind of be in that Amari Stoudemire mold. But yeah, I'm more so leaning towards Woodson. But looking outside the NBA ranks, I'm going to throw a college name at you, and I know you already know what's coming here. Coach Calipari, University of Kentucky. I just see it as a perfect fit. And it's really not for basketball reasons whatsoever, because I have no clue what he would run when it comes to him coming to New Orleans, or to the NBA ranks. But he was a former coach of Anthony Davis at Kentucky, former coach of Tyreek Evans when he was at Memphis. So he has that instant chemistry with those two players. And I honestly feel like his second time around coming into the NBA, we know he had a failed stint with the New Jersey Nets when he first came in, but second time coming around, I think he can find success. I mean, we saw Pete Carroll do it. We will hopefully see, I'm drawing a blank on names here, but we've seen guys come up from the college ranks, fail, go back down to the college ranks, come back and find success. And I think Calipari has the talent to do that as a coach. It would be interesting to see. Honestly, I think I really want it just for the entertainment factor alone. But to me, that's the match that should happen. I don't think Thibodeau's a good fit. I think he's best fit in Orlando, personally, with Oladipo and defensive-minded guys like Oladipo, Elfrid Payton, Aaron Gordon, Tobias Harris if he stays. To me, that's more ideal. But, yeah, Pelicans and Coach Calipari, man, it just goes so well. It goes so well.
No, and it'd be an interesting fit because, like you said, he's coached Anthony Davis before. He's coached Tyreek Evans, and the makeup of the team. It's kind of similar to I wouldn't say maybe to death, but it's reminiscent of the team before the one last year where he had
Julius Randle.
I'm drawing a blank. Yeah, he had Julius Randle and Willie Cauley-Stein. So you got two bigs, an athletic big, and Anthony Davis can pretty much dominate the game. And you got guys who they're not the most consistent, but they're pretty talented when they're on. And like the twins, you got Eric Gordon and Tyreek Evans, Drew Holiday. Similar to I can't believe what's the little guard's name? Not this year, but the year, I want to say Marcus Teague, but I'm drawing a blank. But I do like the fit. I feel like just compositing the team, it kind of fits what Calipari does, at least with his college team. So I mean, I can see it working in the NBA. He's had great success in the college ranks, and like you said, he made the jump to the NBA before, struggled with that. We've seen coaches go back down and come back up, like you said, and find success. So maybe this is the right team. Who knows? But it'd be difficult for me to see him leaving Kentucky at this point.
Yeah, that's the real question. Would he really leave Kentucky? But I have to say, if he does, this is probably the job to do it for. To coach a great player like Anthony Davis when he's yet to hit his prime, I mean, how can any coach turn that down, really? At least, in my opinion, you're going to a good city in New Orleans, a guy you've already coached before, still yet to hit his prime, expected to be a future MVP, future Hall of Famer. I would jump on that in a heartbeat if it's offered to me if I'm Coach Calipari. I think he's done pretty much all he can do in terms of success at the college level. I think there's no question that he'll be considered among the greats no matter what he does from now on at the college ranks. And if the Pelicans come calling, I would not be surprised to see him run up and take that offer. But that is the question: would he leave? Would he leave Kentucky? Because I personally was convinced that Kevin Ollie from UConn would leave Connecticut for the Oklahoma City job, but he came out flat out and said that he's staying in Connecticut, and that's about the second or third time he said that when a coach has come calling from the NBA. So we will see, but if he does want to leave, this is a job to do it, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you. It makes the most sense, at least considering the past teams that they've had. But all right, so Myles, that's going to do it from us today.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us here on The Scoop. I'm Kaelen Jones. Alongside me, Myles Duve. Make sure you check us out on YouTube. Thanks again for tuning in. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yes.